Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back again to another episode of As I Live and Grieve. I hope you've all been taking care of yourselves as we ask you to do. It's very important when you're on your grieving journey. Today, my guest is Andre Roupp. Did I pronounce that correctly?
It's Roupp, yes.
Roupp? Okay, Andre Roupp. And I'm going to let Andre share with you a little of his background. Go ahead and welcome.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with me today and what you do with expressing and talking about grief. It's so important in our lives, everyday life. So my name's Andre Roupp. I'm the funeral director and owner of Roupp Funeral Home in Mifflinburg, Pennsylvania. I've been a funeral director here for 25 years. You know, it flies by very quickly, but in 25 years is certainly a lot of experiences with local families, and every situation and every family that we serve is different, and each of their scenarios is different. So 25 years in the local Mifflinburg community. We have a small community, and they're very tight-knit. And, you know, we host visitations and funerals and celebrations, often you see a lot of the same people coming in that are there to support the family that is grieving at the time. And maybe even it's a situation where those that are coming in to support the family were just in the same situation of grieving of somebody of their own. So it's a small community, and everybody really sticks together and supports each other.
Yeah. I grew up in a small community too. I grew up in Watertown, New York, up near the Thousand Islands, not too far from Canada. But I love that small community. And even though now I'm in a suburb of a much larger city, this community in this little suburb is still quite close as well. So I truly enjoy that. Well, it's no secret, especially when we started this podcast 2.5 years ago. Grief is tough to talk about. Death is tough to talk about. And I kept wondering, why is that? Why is that? Until in a conversation, it occurred to me that generations ago, the way this is before computers, so if there's any young'uns listening, you know, there were nothing like computers or Facebook. But when you had a death in your family, you put on visible signs so that those around you would know that you were grieving. You dressed in black, and there were very strict, I guess I'll call them social protocols, for the length of time you did that to exhibit that you were in mourning. And you wouldn't do certain things. In some communities, you might not even venture out to a grocer or anything like that because you were grieving. The services or any visitations were held in your house, in your parlor. And usually it was the family themselves that prepared the body for burial. Everybody knew. You also draped bunting on the outside of your house. The men wore armbands and some of those specifics. Now, I'm not a history major, but those are my recollections and things I've picked up from discussion. So I wanted to have a conversation about why, when in a generation like that, you could walk down the street, somebody could physically see that you were grieving because of the way you were dressed or the armband or whatever. And all of a sudden, grief is like something we shove in a closet and we don't want to talk about it. It's almost like we're ashamed of it. Someone mentioned to me, this was not my thought, Andre, so please forgive me, that it was the advent of funeral directors and funeral homes that when they took the process and the visitation and the services out of personal space and people actually went to a funeral home, that's about the time that those physical signs of grieving kind of went away. So in their way, I know they were trying to say it's the funeral home's fault. I don't believe that. So I'm hoping that today you and I can kind of have a conversation on what was it like generations ago. And if you have any thoughts or ideas on why grief and death became so difficult to talk about.
Yeah, all those descriptions are very accurate. That of what I've learned, the symbols, the armbands, the bunting, the flower bouquets outside of their home, and I'm not sure, but maybe at that time also it was here's your grieving time. And once your grieving time is over, now it's time to move on with your life, and that's just not as we've evolved and learning more about grief and how it affects and how it runs in each of our lives differently. We at the funeral home now offer. It's the furthest thing from the truth that we're just starting a funeral at the time of the call and
Mhm.
ending at the day of the burial.
Right.
We're checking in the next day after the funeral. We're checking in the
Good.
next week and also at 30 days. On anniversaries, the anniversary of the 1 year anniversary of the death, anniversaries are huge, whether it's a
They
wedding
are.
anniversary, a
They
birthday.
are.
And until you've felt it, until you've experienced it, lived it,
Mhm. Right.
me personally, the 1 year anniversary of my father passing, that entire week I was off. I felt, internally something I was off, and I didn't realize. I think until the actual anniversary day that it all kind of came out. I said, "Wow, that affected me way more than I would have imagined."
Right.
We reach out on anniversaries, and families, they know. They know that 30 day, they know that two
They
months,
do.
they know that 1 year.
Yep.
And it's important
Mhm.
for families, I think, to know that we're thinking about you,
Mhm.
that you have help and you have support. So just a couple of thoughts when you had mentioned that a lot of times, back in the 40s and that funerals and visitations were held in families' homes. My grandfather was a funeral director, licensed director in Pennsylvania and New York State for 66 years. And when he began in funeral service, it was really a full service start.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
start, the initial call. Often people would pass at home normally.
Mhm.
So they actually did embalming at the family home.
Oh,
My
really?
father it was an embalming kit.
Oh.
It included a cot that the body would be placed on this cot. It
Mhm.
it had, you opened up and had tools and items that would be used for the embalming, and it would all be done in the family home, uh,
Oh.
followed by dressing of the body and sometimes
Yeah.
preparation of the viewing.
Wow.
Uh, my grandfather would, prepare all of the, what on top of all the paperwork that was included. He would then, in arrangements with the family, he would go to the cemetery and dig the graveside,
Oh my
the grave
goodness.
plots, dig the graves by hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of things have changed, obviously, from that, and a lot of things have changed in our knowledge and our growth in grieving. And I think that's really important, to be okay to grieve, and be
Yeah.
okay to grieve not only a week after the death, but a
Mhm.
year and for the rest of your time here.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm convinced, and I've said it on this show many times. My husband died 5 years ago. I remember that date, but I do not remember our wedding anniversary. Now that's peculiar. We were only married just shy of 12 years. I can tell you about when it was, but the day he died is engraved in my memory. And even though it's been 5 years, when that day comes, I know exactly that that day is approaching. And on that day, I'm a little sadder than I normally am because all of those memories come back again. I think it's wonderful that your organization is reaching out to people on those special days and just touching base, just letting them know that you still remember, that you still think about them, that you still care and you're still there to support them. I think that's incredible. It's not true for all funeral homes, I know. So that's very unique, and I applaud you for having those standards. Um, so funerals have changed, of course, from that viewing in the home and all of that, those visible signs. It's different, and for probably a certain generation, decades anyway, there have been visitations and ceremonies in funeral homes themselves. In many ways, it takes it out of your family home so that you don't have those reminders. You don't have those memories when you sit down in the living room, for example, that at one point grandma or grandpa, their casket was there. So that's removed. And I do believe that having it in a different location probably helps the grief process. So, just as if it changed, kind of morphed into what we know now, it's morphing now, isn't it? Because the burial process specifically, maybe not funerals, but it's changing because, to my knowledge, there are an incredible number of options out there for burial.
Sure, there is, and I'll get to a few of those options. But just you piqued my interest on the out of the home because of the memories and the thoughts. We have times where people
Hmm.
celebrated the life or have a viewing or visitation time here at the funeral home, and their first time back, maybe there are lots of memories
Yeah,
going
yeah.
through. The same thing with church. The next time they go back into church on Sunday,
Sure.
and their feelings are flowing. We offer lots of different experiences and events here at the funeral home where it's not you're just not coming here for the sad times. We offer
Right.
we offer free coffee the first Friday of every month, a morning coffee where people can come in and socialize and chat and talk, and it doesn't have to be about funeral related.
Oh,
We have
nice.
we have cocoa with Santa during the Christmas time, and we have Halloween costume
I
contests.
love that.
So a lot of times that are bringing children in and
I
youth
love that.
that they're saying, "Oh, you know what? It's okay to go
Yeah.
to a funeral home, and this
Yeah.
is it's not the dark corners and shadows and
Hmm.
so giving time for people and especially youth to come in and share the space, and,
Hmm.
and as well as we offer weekly grief sessions where people can come in and share grief.
Hmm.
So it's more than just a place to go for something sad. Um,
Right.
and you mentioned the options are quite different now. And
Yeah.
70 years ago, the majority was very traditional. The 2-day viewing, followed
Hmm.
by a funeral service, followed by a graveside committal. That has moved a lot of where we are throughout this nation. Is cremation is
Hmm.
increasing.
Yeah.
Lots of levels of cremation.
Sure.
There's viewing of the body, followed by funeral service, followed by cremation.
Hmm.
Direct cremation, followed by celebration of life and videos and pictures.
Right.
There's also times where the celebration of life may be, we've done this here at the funeral home as well, outside, like a picnic style,
Right.
sharing
Right.
style. So it's not confined to one particular thought of grieving
Hmm.
and want to proceed with your process of grief.
Yeah.
Also, what is growing is earth, very natural earth burials for cemetery.
Yes.
There's, everything is all natural and going back
Hmm.
to where we've been
Right.
actually had a few experiences with that recently in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So lots of options.
Yeah.
And I think that people are realizing that, you know, I don't have to be confined into this one grief option.
Right.
It really doesn't fit me and my family.
Right. Right. You can choose one that brings pleasant memories. I know there's even I don't really know if it's open yet, but there's even a reef off the coast of Florida where you can be buried within this reef. And there are options to have ashes turned into a small sculpture or something like that. And people can even scuba dive down for visitation. Fascinating options. all of these, I think, can actually help the griever because it doesn't feel like that burdensome, which is how it felt to me when my father died. I remember you go through the funeral. He was not cremated. He was in the casket. We closed the lid of the casket. That was a very emotional, very difficult time to close the lid of the casket. Then to go graveside and have him buried, to watch him lowered into the ground, very traumatic. But to me, something like planting remains or having remains become a part of the earth, for me, is almost like completing a cycle. The earth nourishes us while we're living, and then our remains can nourish the earth after we die. So, would you agree, Andre, that some of these options can actually help the grievers through the process by giving better memories?
Sure, sure. One option that comes to my mind as well that we've done, and that is planting a tree together as a family, and sharing memories, and doing this celebration, and almost planting a new life,
Mm-hmm.
and some place where you can go back to. Um,
Yeah.
and as that tree grows and still can go back and remember, and life goes on. And I guess it's kind of a symbol of our life moving forward. If we allow ourselves to be swallowed up in grief, it can happen easily,
Sure.
and really not move forward in the life that we were expecting, or maybe that our loved ones were expecting us to be.
Right. Exactly.
And I think we owe it to the loved one's legacy who's passed,
Mm-hmm.
to move forward as how we can keep his or her legacy alive,
I
and
agree.
doing that in a healthy manner, on our
Mm-hmm.
own.
Yeah, I agree. We've mentioned kids several times in here, and the one piece, not one, the one, but a piece missing from the history aspect of it for me is how were kids involved or not involved generations ago when you have a body lying in a casket in your parlor, things like that. What happened with the kids? Were they kind of sheltered from it? Were they
Mhm.
involved in it? Do you have any information on that?
That's a good question. That's still a tough question that we get often. Uh,
Hmm.
with those ages of really tough developmental ages of 5 to 10, I'm just
Hmm.
thinking.
Yeah.
But what do we do? Do we bring them? Should we?
Yeah.
And it's there's no exact perfect answer.
Okay.
Um, but we've witnessed young children coming up to say goodbye to mom or dad,
Hmm.
and those are some of the toughest. Those are some of
Yeah.
the see.
Yeah.
You know, I can't say for sure. I think um, a lot earlier times, children maybe were not involved as much,
Hmm.
um, and maybe that's affected their own grief process later in life.
Yeah.
What when my grandma died, I was 10 years old and I didn't go to the funeral. I don't know anything
Mm.
about it. So you have people that are now in their 30s, 40s, and 50s experiencing their first funeral, maybe
Right.
with a parent or other.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe not diving in head first with, but expressing very truthfully as much as you can to the level of the youth, whether it's a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old or someone in high school, um,
Hmm.
to express, be very truthful and very honest, and ask if they have questions. What questions
Yeah.
do? And I think that's
Yeah.
really.
I would agree. I can shed some personal insight. I raised two daughters as a single mom, and there were times I went to calling hours at a funeral home but I did not expect, or I did not even invite either of my daughters to go with me. Doing what my parents had done, sheltering the child from, a natural sad time in our lives. My older daughter, Stephanie, didn't attend her first funeral until she was, I think, 22, maybe 23. She never said anything to me about it, but later in a conversation on the podcast, she mentioned that when she knew she was going to her first calling hours, she had no clue what to expect. She didn't know if the body would be there, if the body would be in a casket, if the casket would be open or closed. She had no idea, no preconceived notion about what that was, and she was very uncomfortable because of that. This same person, my daughter Stephanie, when my husband Tom died. Now Tom was her stepfather. So she was close in some aspects and not in others. The boys, they were close. They played with him and everything like that. When he died, the boys came with Stephanie and her husband Neil to the funeral home. They were there for the entire visitation time. And I remember just kind of walking in the hallway on my way to the restroom, and outside I saw the youngest, AJ, who was I want to say he was maybe 5th or 6th grade at the time. And he was just on the steps outside sobbing. It broke my heart. But he then had a project for his school that he had to do at the year end, and they could talk about anything. He chose to talk about my husband as a veteran in the Army, and the cause of his death was a glioblastoma, which was related to Agent Orange. So that was his topic, that he stood there in front of his class, in front of parents, and spoke very maturely and very professionally about that. And I thought, yeah, okay. So maybe it is a good thing to let the kids know what happens, and also to let them grieve too.
Yeah. I happen to agree with you in that manner. And again, I think the understanding and the introduction, it depends on
Mm-hmm.
each in their development. But I do think
Yeah,
it's very important for them to be aware and
yeah,
have their opportunity to grieve and
absolutely.
ask questions, um,
Yeah,
because children grieve too, um,
sure
and
they do.
we need to give them that opportunity.
Right. And I also think it can help the parents' grieving process if their kids know about it and have an opportunity to ask questions, because then you don't feel like you're keeping a secret, and it allows you to grieve in front of your kids too,
Sure.
because your kids know that everyone hurts when you're grieving.
Yeah, and I think it's okay. Important for them to know it's
Yeah,
okay.
I do.
Mom or
I
dad are
do.
grieving. Um,
I would agree.
it's okay that I can. And I think it also opens up that when we talk about anniversaries of, because
Hmm.
kids know too. Kids
Yeah,
are aware of those
sure
anniversaries,
they do.
their mom's birthday.
Sure
Um,
they
how,
do.
how can we remember mom or dad in
Right.
special on their birthday? And I think
Yeah.
that's really
And there's
important.
a variety of ways. Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast. Um, yeah, there's so much into it, and the history to me, is very interesting. So, I appreciate a chance to kind of walk back and see. And I don't know how many years it stays in one place, and then it morphs into something else. And in some ways, it's morphing again. But I would say to people, um, that you still need your friend, the funeral director, because
Hmm.
I can't imagine making arrangements, say, for burial in this underwater reef
Mhm.
at that time in my life when I'm hurting so much. So, it's still a vital service. And as well, they've got your back. I can't say it in a better way. They've got your back. And it's so nice to be able to go to somewhere and attend a celebration of life, for example, and not have to be the one that has to make all the arrangements and do all the,
Sure.
if there's any cleanup or anything like that. So
Sure.
that key position, once the funeral directors came, into being, so to speak, and they got established, I don't believe that's going to go away at all.
Well,
I don't think that part's going to change.
I like that. We've got your back. We do.
Yeah, they
You know,
do.
everyone, when you need a hand, it's okay to reach out and
Yeah,
I need help, and that's what we're here for. And
yeah,
there's often, we have people come in and say, "I have no idea where to go from here. Where do I
yeah,
start?"
yeah, yeah.
Um, and it's a guidance that is essential in
Hmm.
grieving,
Yeah,
in even that week and moving forward. And there's
yeah,
lots of things you've got on your mind in everyday life, and then all of a sudden there's
yeah,
a loss,
yeah.
and it's a tough thing to pile on.
It is.
It could be very stressful, and that's why we do
Yeah.
offer so many different outlets for
Hmm.
grieving.
And I
um,
think that's wonderful. I really do. I
you
really do. Yeah, it makes it entire. Well, it's not like, the celebration of life is over. See ya. See you
Mhm.
at the next one. It's not like that at all. You remain a part of their lives, and they know when they need help, when they need support, that they can come back to you. So I think that's great. Sadly, our time is winding down. It happens so fast. 30 minutes is great for conversation, but when you get into a topic that you're passionate about and you could really speak for a long time, yeah, here it is. So, this is the time in the podcast, Andre, where I turn the mic over to you and let you speak directly to our listeners. After 2.5 years, we now have listeners in 82 different countries around the world. So, there are a lot of people out there that you can reach with this message. So, it's your turn.
This opportunity to speak with you and about the grieving process. And I would just, there's so many of your listeners that I would encourage to reach out to your local funeral home and see what they have to offer. If you're hurting, events, time, social events. If you check out our website at rouppfuneralhome.com, you'll see a lot of services we provide, opportunities to be planning ahead, that you're not, dealing with information and decisions at probably the most
Oh,
difficult.
yeah. Yeah. That's a true gift.
There's grief support options of what we have here at the funeral home, and different resources, events that we offer here at the funeral home, such as we've done a grief yoga,
Oh, wow.
our east lawn, and which has had great feedback, and we've been doing that about quarterly. And these events, it gives an opportunity for people to come out and socialize and get out of their.
Yeah.
And we have cooking options on our website for those that have lost maybe a spouse, and maybe your spouse was the person who did all the cooking or all the.
Right.
What do I do?
Yeah.
I'm now going
Yeah.
in and doing the cooking and shop. I've never done that. Um, what do you say when you go into a restaurant and sit down by yourself,
Mhm.
and the waitress or waiter, and not saying, doing this poorly, but says, "Oh, are you all by yourself? Just one?" Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's how you're moving forward, and do not be afraid or hesitant to reach out to us here at the funeral home, or to your local funeral home, to see what kind of outlets and activities and
Hmm.
options you have. It's very.
That's great. Yeah. Do you offer any virtual activities or get-togethers?
We have every year we have our end of our holiday memorial service, which we
Okay.
celebrate the life of each family that we've served over
Hmm.
that year. It's at the
Nice.
December, and it's an in-person or virtual. That we have music, and we have a local choir that comes in to share, and a
Nice.
pastor who reads the names of those who have
Hmm.
passed and does a light memorial service. We with those events that we have, often other celebrations of life, we do virtual as well.
Okay. All
Uh,
right.
so those technical times are changing as well. I know with
Yes.
COVID, it was a big twist and turn in that direction, and it's certainly something that's not going away, and we're growing with that.
Okay. All right. Great. Sounds great. And what is your website?
RouppFuneralHome.com. Certainly lots of resources there, and I encourage you to look, and might be something that connects with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, as always, we will include your website, your contact information in our podcast notes for the people that want to reach out to you. So, everyone, I guess it's time to say farewell for today. We talked about self care and everything. I do want to just tack on something else. I interrupted Andre's last moments by saying that's a gift. And I just want to tell you what I mean by that. My mother was the inveterate planner, and she planned her funeral ahead of time and paid for it so that when she died, I went to the funeral home and I didn't have to make any decisions. She had already made them. She had her casket picked out. She knew how she wanted calling hours to work. She knew what church she wanted her service in. We did make one change to that because she actually wound up living in a nursing home and they had a lovely chapel. So we did that so their staff could also participate and get some closure. But I can't tell you how much relief that gave me. And as I compare that to when my husband died, who didn't even want to talk about the fact that he had a terminal illness and would eventually die, wouldn't even have a conversation, I had to make all those decisions. It was so hard. So if you are able, reach out to your local funeral director. Start making some of these plans, even if you can't pay for it ahead of time, but start making these plans, getting them written down. Find out what your options are. That is one of the best gifts. I truly believe this to the bottom of my heart. That's one of the best gifts you can give the people you love that will be left behind when you die. They won't have to make those decisions because they will know exactly what your wishes are. So, on that note, everybody, stay well. Catch us again next week as we all continue to live and grieve.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asiliveandgrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.